keeping me safe and sound. And when I fall, you tied a rope to me.
Hey everyone, welcome back to She Blurs Podcast. Today's guest is Randi Lee. Hi, Randi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming on my podcast today and being a guest.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So can you tell our listeners, when did you first realize you wanted to be an author?
Well, okay. So when I realized I wanted to actually be an author, like as a job, that was probably about 2 years ago, even though I published my first book like 4 years ago. But I started writing, and I knew that I loved writing right from like being a kid. I would write like plays and poems and all sorts of different things like that.
Wow, that's nice. That's really nice. I used to keep journals all the way from like 7 to like now. But that's cool. You used to keep journals too?
Oh yeah. I threw them out because my kids started reading them and questioning me about things I did as a teenager. I'm like, oh, yep, that's going in the garbage.
That's funny. Wow. I hope whenever I have kids, they don't do that. But so can you tell us, can you tell our listeners what or who inspired you to start writing?
So it wasn't a who, but a what. I started really writing when my depression got really bad when I was a teenager, and using writing, mostly poetry as a teenager, was a really good coping strategy for me.
Oh, that's nice. That really does help, like with depression, because
it helped me anyways.
It does. Like, what are some of the things you write down to help with depression? Because I'm trying to do that. It's not helping.
So okay, well, if you have depression, then you know all of those awesome, intrusive, horrible thoughts that come in your brain.
Yeah.
So mine would often tell me to hurt myself, or to unalive myself.
Yeah.
And so instead of doing those things, I would write about doing them. And that was like a release. And my brain was like, all right, we'll let you go. That's good enough then.
Wow. I'm going to try that. Usually I play with my dog, like we'll chase each other back and forth, and that'll get my mind off of it. But usually one of us runs into something. So
oh no.
That's pretty funny. Like she ran into the tote chasing me. But yeah, like I'm gonna try that one day. I'm gonna try that. Hopefully it works. But it's tough.
It doesn't work for everybody, but it works for me. So
So what does your family think about your writing, your children and your husband?
When I first started, my husband was like, oh, that's cool that you did that. Like, all right, cool. How much is this going to cost me? And I was like, it's not going to cost you anything. Then there's printing the books and having a website and marketing, and just don't tell him. But my kid thinks it's pretty good. Actually, quite a few of my books, like kids' books, I get him to do the pictures for me, and still don't get like a I'm your mom discount. No, I pay full price. But no, they think it's pretty cool. My husband's very supportive, especially since like I've been keeping up with it, because I have this tendency to jump from one thing to the next, just following whatever is fun in that moment. But I mean, I've been publishing books now for 4 years.
Wow.
So I think I'm sticking with it.
That's good. Like on your website, I was reading about one of your books called Embracing Me. You did tell me a little bit about it, but can you tell our listeners in depth like what inspired it even further?
Sure. So Embracing Me, it's my story of dealing with my depression, and it's my third nonfiction book. So I started actually with writing about mental health. That's one of the biggest things that I love to talk about and bring a light to. So my very first book was actually that poetry that I was writing as a teenager, and it's just a compilation of it all. And so as I'm talking to people and they're asking me more about my story, I'm like, well, I guess that book that I wrote about mental health doesn't really go in depth about any of that stuff because it's mostly just the poetry. So I guess I better write my story out for people because they keep asking. And so that's kind of where that idea came from. And so I wrote it, and each chapter kind of focuses on a different aspect of my wellness, my health, or my mental health. And so it starts with like, write a letter to your younger self. It goes into medication and therapy, and just kind of shedding light on these are not bad things. Because so many people go, oh, you take medication, you need help with that, or you go to therapy, oh, you're crazy. And that's not the case at all. And so I wanted to make sure people understood that it's okay to do those things. And in fact, it really helps.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. And I feel like a lot of people, they either harshly judge what they don't understand, or they mock you or belittle you when they don't understand it. Like,
Exactly.
oh my goodness. Yes. Like my mother, for instance, she didn't understand why I was having the harm myself thoughts. And she was like, well, you care too much about what people think. Like, she thinks that that's like the main source, but she doesn't understand that it's her that's the source of all my problems. Like,
well,
but,
she can't blame herself. She can't take responsibility.
Right. Right. Oh my goodness. So how do you, like in your book, how do you explain your mental health, like your mental illness? Like, how do you explain it to the listeners?
I try to be as honest and blunt as I can about it. I don't want to beat around the bush. So I do talk about having suicidal thoughts. And I actually explained what they were in the book. So for me, my plan, because I had a plan. I had it all planned out. I was going to drive my car off a certain bridge that I live near, because I live near a lot of bridges. But I was going to pick this one that was kind of like out of the way so nobody would see, to be able to help me. And just wanting to make sure that people understand that just because you say it, trying to figure out the best way to put this. I want people to know that, first off, it's okay if you have those thoughts, because lots of us do. But what is not okay is you not seeking help for them, because that is when it gets really bad. And so I explained that in the book, that I realized that I needed to go to therapy because my thoughts changed from just like, yeah, I think I want to die, to here's my plan of how I'm going to do it. And I'm like, oh, wait, I got a plan now. This is serious. And that's when I went to therapy, and then talking about how therapy, again, it's not a bad thing at all. And I take antidepressants every day. And so I just lay it all out there for people. And I try not to hold anything back. And I mean, if people have questions, if they're like, hey, I think you did hold something back, go ahead and ask me. I'll tell you.
Yeah. Like, okay, how did you explain to like your family members about taking medication? Because when I do that, a lot of my family members, they're like, well, you don't need medication. I'm like, but you don't see the things I see. Like, if someone lashes out at me, I see the guy that sexual assaulted me. So it makes me want to harm them as well as harm myself. And I'm like, you don't understand. I don't see your face anymore. I see the person that hurt me. Like, I see his face. Yeah. And it's like, they don't understand why I need the medication, you know? Like, how do you explain that to people? Like, that I need this medication because of this? Like,
so my family is actually really good about that. I didn't really get any slack from my family about it. Most of my issues around taking medication were actually from myself. It was totally an internalized issue. And the internalized issue was, if I take medication, it means I'm weak. I'm not strong enough to handle this. I'm useless. Now, that kind of issue, that kind of traumatic thinking really came down to my family, because I was always to be perfect, because my brother was the complete opposite of me. And so I don't want to say the golden child, but like, we just watched Encanto, and so the song is in my head, and that's the term they used. But I was the one that, was going to graduate high school, was going to graduate college, was going to do all of these things, because my brother was never going to do them. And so in my mind, if I took medication, then I wasn't strong enough and I was weak. But when I finally went and took it, I got no slack from my family. I actually got slack from my husband when I stopped taking it.
Oh, wow.
So when you take antidepressants, you're not really supposed to stop taking them randomly all by yourself as a decision.
True.
And I did. It did not go well. It made things much worse.
Oh, yeah.
Because I didn't wean myself off of it or anything, because they're very strong type of medication.
Right.
And so if people are going to get off of them with their doctor, they usually try to wean them off so that your body doesn't go into like a shock, like, hey, where is this now? And so I didn't. I thought, oh, I feel so much better. I'm fine. I don't need this anymore. Again, that was just my internalized issues of being perfect all the time, because I was like, okay, great, I don't need these anymore. I need to get off of them because I can do everything all by myself.
Yeah.
And I didn't tell my husband at the time either.
Oh.
Yeah. So obviously I knew that I was doing something wrong, or else why would I have hidden it from everyone? But I did. And so when I did finally decide to go back on it, we were walking the dogs the one day, actually last year, and I said, I think I really got to go back on my antidepressants. My husband looks at me and he's like, you're off of them?
Wow.
He's like, would you like me to just stop taking my insulin? He's diabetic. And I'm like, no, I don't want you to die. He goes, exactly.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
It's good to have that support, though. It's really good to have that support, because a lot of guys that I've dated, they didn't know how to handle someone who has because my mental illness is really bad. I've been in the hospital 8 times last year for trying to commit suicide.
Wow. Yeah, my kid was like that too.
Oh, your kid?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. In and out the hospital a lot. He hasn't been in the hospital now for 3 years, but he went to like a very intensive treatment. He actually had to live away from home for a couple months.
Wow. So he has clinical depression too, or?
Yeah, he's got depression, anxiety, autism, ADHD, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Because every time we would go to the hospital, instead of helping, they would just say, oh yeah, you also have this, you have this.
Dang. They told me that too. And bipolar. I'm like, dang, I got bipolar too. And they're like, yeah. Can't you tell?
Like,
and I'm
great.
like,
how do you fix it? How do you help me with that?
Help me. But, yeah. So you wrote another book called Little Scare. So can you tell our listeners about that, about what inspired that?
Sure. So totally 360 on what I was writing, or I guess 180, because 360 brings us back to the start. So total 180 on it. It's fiction, which is really good, because if this stuff was real life, then it'd be a really scary place to live. And it's a collection of short, scary stories. I have always been a horror fan. I love everything horror. And so when I was younger, any school projects or whatever, I would always kind of try and make them like a horror-ish story to hand into the teachers. And if we had to write a book report, I'd pick the scary story, give me some Stephen King or something. And so I had all of these old stories that I had written, and there's only one of them is actually, or two of them in the book are old from my high school that I actually found I still had in my house. But they're all just short, scary stories, quick reads, maybe 10-15 minutes tops to read each one. There's 10 stories in the book, and they're all totally different. And I'm not a slasher writer. Like, none of them are slasher or super bloody, but they're all super creepy and like monsters and stuff.
Ooh, I want to read this one. So is it like those books that mess with your head, like how Stephen King does, like mess with your head, like you're like, what?
A couple of them are, yeah, but because they're so short, it's hard to get that kind of twist in there. Okay. But I do have an outline of a full-length novel that I'm hoping will be a little bit more twisty. I'm going to say that's going to take me a couple of years to do. Just my attention span, right? I'll probably write it, then leave and write something else and come back to it.
That's what I've been doing. So can you tell our listeners about another new book that you said that recently came out. It's Whoopsie's Trip to the Hospital. Am I saying it right?
Yeah, Woofy.
Whoopsie.
Woofy, like, because the dog says woof. So it's a
Yeah,
kid's
Whoopsie.
book. It's a kid's book, and it's about this little stuffed dog named Woofy who lives in a classroom of kids, and each week he goes home with one of the different kids because I'm going to turn it into a series. So the first one here, he goes home with Jack, and Jack is on his way to the hospital that week to get his tonsils out, and he's very scared. So Woofy has to help him be brave.
Oh, that's cute. That's really
And,
cute.
It's one of the ones that my kid did the pictures for. So they're super cute pictures too.
Oh, your kid drew the pictures. Ooh, I can't wait to watch that one.
Oh, I can't hear you. What happened?
Cute.
Oh, there we go.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, okay. It was like it lost connection to my mic, and I'm like, But so can you tell our? I forgot my question. So can you tell our listeners what's your favorite chapter and why from Woofy?
I missed the question. Can you say it again?
It got you distracted.
It did. It totally did.
So can you tell our listeners what's your favorite chapter in Woofy Goes to the Hospital?
My favorite part is actually, okay, so when you go to the hospital, right, and you have to put on like a hospital gown because you're going to have an operation, and hospital gowns have an open side, right? And so I didn't write this. I just wrote, he put on his hospital gown that has the back open. So when my kid did the picture for it, Woofy, so each picture is Woofy, and all the pictures revolve around him. And it's him laughing and the thought bubble of a little butt.
That's cute.
Yeah.
That's adorable. I cannot wait to read that one too.
Yeah, it's super cute. It was actually, it's funny. My aunt found it. It was her idea. So my aunt found this story that she had written for my cousin's class in 1994.
Wow.
And she's like, "Hey, could you use this and turn it into a story?" And I was like, "Sure." So I looked at it. I'm like, "Okay, it's not bad. Like it needs a bunch of editing here, but we'll get it worked out. We'll fix it up." And so, yeah, turned it into that. And now I told her, I said, "Okay, well, where's Woofy gonna go next? Because Woofy's your character. You brought him to life."
That's gonna be cute. It's gonna be really cute. So, do you have any new books coming out this upcoming year in 2022?
Definitely. So I am writing. My brain just went blank. Okay, so I am writing the history of Crime Stoppers in Niagara. So the local chapter of our Crime Stoppers here. I'm about halfway, probably 3/4 of the way written that one already. It's been very interesting doing all the research for that as well. And then I also have another mental health book coming out that I'm writing with a co-author, and it's mental health and the Bible, like, so from our personal perspective of how we relate to it. And then the one that I am probably most excited for that I've got the outline, actually. I have written the outline, as in, there's 5 bullet points, and then I'm just going to roll with it. But it's another nonfiction book. So earlier this year, my brother died from addiction. And so I'm going to be writing a book about, as a family member who cares about somebody with addiction, but how do you protect yourself as well as still love them, because sometimes you have to love them from a distance, because it's a very severe mental illness, and you can't always help them. They have to be the one to make those decisions for themselves, and that can be really difficult. So yeah, I'm going to be writing that one. I'm most excited for that. And of course, I'm sure I'll be writing some more kids books and random stuff, but those are the ones that I have planned.
That's cool. That's really nice. So, what does your family think about the book about your brother? Like, have they said anything?
Well, I've told my aunt. My aunt's very supportive, the one that actually came up with Woofy. So she thinks it's a pretty good idea. I don't think I've told my mom. I told my cousin. My cousin thinks it's a good idea as well. And actually, at my brother's funeral, my cousin came up to me. She lives in Toronto. She came up, and I was holding it all together. I was good. I wasn't crying yet. And she hugs me, and she goes, "What you're doing is really important."
Yeah.
I started bawling. I'm like, "Oh my god." So I don't think my mom's gonna have a big issue with it, as long as, because I'm not gonna write it in a mean way. Obviously, like, I love my brother. He made some poor decisions, sure, but we all make poor decisions at times.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it'd be hard for her to read.
Yeah.
But I don't know if she'll actually read it. So
Ooh. Let me know when that book comes out so I can review it, because I feel like that'll help a lot of people, because I have a lot of people that are in my life that's like addicted. So yeah, that definitely.
Yeah, I'll give you a copy as soon as it's ready.
Oh, thanks. So my last and final question, then I'll let you go. What advice would you give our listeners who want to pursue a writing career?
Just write. I know it sounds so simple, but I'll expand on it so it's not such a short answer. But really, if you want to write, then the best thing to do is to write. Now, it doesn't mean that the first couple of things you write are going to be good. It doesn't mean that you're going to publish them, because I've got stuff that I've written that will never see the light of day. But in order to get better at something, you have to do it. So even if you're like, I'm not that great of a writer, but I have all these awesome ideas and I think that I could do it, do it. And don't be discouraged if you try to go the traditional publishing route, because that's crazy hard. And most of us, we just self-publish our books. And you know what? A self-published author is still an author, and your books are still valid and still really awesome. I review a lot of books, and most of them are all self-published authors, and they're really good. Really? There's been a couple that I'm like, but most of them, I'm gonna say 90% of them are really good.
Yeah, that's really great advice, because I'm writing my first book, so that's really great advice. I'm gonna take that hard.
Well, when your book is finally about to be published, you can come on my podcast and talk about it.
Oh, yeah, I would love to. I want to thank you so much for coming on my podcast and chatting with me today about your books.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
You have a great day.
You too.
Bye. Bye.